So I was like, Lupita, if your mother lives 2 blocks away, why are you living here in this orphanage? And she's like, oh, my mom, for $5 of crystal meth, used to put on porn videos, and whatever they did in the porn videos, I would have to do with the men that came and gave her the drugs. And I'm looking at this little girl, just a little girl, and I was like, even I'd done a lot of things, I couldn't conceive of that. I started out in investment banking, and I think my senior year of college, my net income was $25 million. And so I had a partner, and one day he said to me, we can make a lot more money if you're willing to go to Europe. And I said, okay, what are we talking about? Back then in Europe, the tax rate was 70%. So he sent me over to Europe, and I started laundering money for not cartels, doctors, lawyers, corporations. So that's how I got my understanding of money laundering. I was at a party. I was dating a girl at USC. I was living in Newport Beach at the time. I went into the bathroom, and as I'm walking in, there's this guy in there. And we just started talking, and he's like, hey, do you want to come to my birthday party? And he said, it's in Mexico. I'm like, yeah, I'll go. We exchanged numbers. I thought I'll never hear from the guy. So I'm at my office in Newport Coast, and he calls me. He says, hey, we're going to pick you up at the airport. I'm like, we're going to Mexico. Let's drive. He's like, no, we're flying. So I get to John Wayne in a private jet. He's there in a private jet. He's got 4 other people in the plane, and we fly, and we land on a private strip in south of Tijuana, north of Ensenada. And we land on a private strip, and there's guys and cars, machine guns, and all these things. And I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. We get out, we go to the party. It was like something you'd see out of a movie. The waiters walking around with platters with cocaine, joints. And this guy walks by with all the security, and he goes inside the house. Well, like 3 minutes later, 2 guys come out and they grab me, and they're like, hey, come with us. I get taken into an office, and he's there, and he puts a gun in my mouth. And he's like, we know you're DEA, ¿qué haces aquí? What are you doing here? And I'm like, man, hey, I'm trying to point to this kid that invited me. Thank God the kid that invited me was his son. He comes in, he's like, no, he's cool. They ran everything. This is back, computers you didn't have technology like you have it today. They knew everything about me, where I lived, all the businesses that I had, bank accounts, within 15 minutes. They knew everything, like data that is not available. They knew everything about me. So it came up, he's like, so, what do you do? I'm like, I launder money. I'm thinking the way out of this is to be a criminal like them. And that's where the relationship started. So they were not cartel per se. They were independent bankers. We worked for all the cartels. We would work with anyone that had money. He had me flying all over Latin America, making relationships and moving money. I kept quitting because I didn't want to do the laundering stuff. Like I knew it was dirty. I was sleeping with a lot of women, doing drugs, and around people. I saw a lot of people get killed. I'd been in shootouts. It just wasn't something that I really wanted to do. So I had gotten out, and they called me, and they're like, hey, we've got a big one. I was going to make like $5 million on a couple $100 million in Bali. And so I talked to my friend, who's the son. I said, listen, I'll do it if you go with me. And he had just gotten married, so me, him, and his wife get on one of the jets, and we fly to Bali. So we're at dinner, everything's going great, loving meals, and all of a sudden we heard this massive explosion. And I don't know if you go back, that discotheque was blown up by terrorists. And so that was it for me. I got on a plane the next day. I flew back home, and within a week, I was on a flight, the last flight that ever left Los Angeles, directly to Havana. I was on that plane. Flew to Havana, and I started smoking cigars, Cuban cigars, and I just fell in love with Cuba. I got connected there to the Minister of Finance, started doing investments. They wanted boats, they wanted fertilizer, started out small things. And then I raised $30 million to help them build, and I funded 2 hotels in Havana. As soon as the hotels were up, the way Cuba works as a foreign investor or foreign investment group, they own 51, you own 49. Hotels get up, I was supposed to start getting paid, get a call to come to Havana, showed up in Havana, and Fidel had me thrown out of the country. Gave me a ticket, and I had all my cash, everything I had left was in bank accounts in Cuba, put me on a plane and said goodbye. They sent me back to Tijuana. So I spent 10 days living on the street, and I started to feel peace. Like I hadn't watched birds fly or felt the grass on my skin. The library was there. I was stealing books from the library and just reading like 3 Clancy books every 2 days. And I thought, wow, that there's actually more to life, because I had just spent the last 15 years doing 3 things: money, girls, and party. That's all I did for 15 years of my life. I got connected to a small orphanage in the red light zone on Calle F. Martinez. And so God sent me right back, like right there where I used to be evil to where I was doing good. And I started helping out at this orphanage, and it was an American couple that ran it. One day I'm sitting there and I'm with Damaris and Lupita. Lupita's like 10 and Damaris is like 13. And so we're having this conversation, and Lupita said, my mom's coming to visit. It was a Saturday, and she said, my mom's coming to visit tomorrow. And I said, Lupita, where's your mom? She's like, oh, she only lives 2 blocks away. So I was like, Lupita, if your mother lives 2 blocks away, why are you living here in this orphanage? And she's like, oh, my mom, for $5 of crystal meth, used to put on porn videos, and whatever they did in the porn videos, I would have to do with the men that came and gave her the drugs. And I'm looking at this little girl, just a little girl, and I was like, even I'd done a lot of things, I couldn't conceive of that. I didn't know that existed at that point. I was speechless, and I looked over at Damaris, and I'm crying, and Damaris is just looking at me like something's wrong with me. Lupita's looking at me like smiling, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? So I asked Damaris, I'm like, and you? ¿Y tú? And she told me just crazy stuff. Living in this alley, and her mom would go to work and getting raped by all the neighbors because they knew that mom was gone all night because she was a prostitute there. But I went back to the hotel that night, and I just cried. And I don't think I slept at all that night. I just cried, and I was like, how can this be real? Like, I didn't know what God was calling me to yet. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to serve in this orphanage. And that's when God spoke to me. He's like, yeah, you're gonna rescue these kids. And so that's where it started.